أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So my two previous speakers, mashallah, my colleagues, Sheikh Saad and Dr. Suzy Ismail, started to cover, and the last part that I'm going to talk about is essentially the assessment of where we are with this topic of where are the emerging youth leaders. For me, I actually begin because my wife and I, alhamdulillah, are raising 4 children, the oldest of whom is 14 and the youngest of whom is about 2.5. The question is not where they are. The question is actually, are you and I ready for them to be able to assume positions of leadership within our community? So I'll make just a few points about that, inshallah, and then we'll conclude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Kahf, which we are recommended by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to recite on Fridays, introduces us through that surah to a group of youth who essentially stood up, if you will, for their beliefs. They stood up for what they believed in, and the ruler of their time, who opposed whatever their belief system was, would have gone after them, because had their way of life, had their belief system caught hold, had people started following it, he would have been gone, meaning the ruler. And so when these youth escaped to the cave, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى, that indeed they were youth who believed in their Lord, and by virtue of that belief, their Lord increased them in guidance. So first and foremost, let us make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that indeed He does replace the current leadership with leaders who are inshaAllah ta'ala stronger, have greater insights, and indeed a deeper commitment than all of the leaders we have now, which are beautiful people who are beautiful people, but of course change must come. So that dua has to be there. Say Ameen. For me, looking at that story of the youth of the cave, it also tells me that there was a system in place that Allah is talking about. Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying that He insulated those youth in that cave for not decades but centuries to be able to preserve their way of life. So Sheikh Saad mentioned some of the things we should not encourage in terms of our youth. Sister Suzy talked about the community aspect of it. What I'm here to say is that in my assessment of looking at the youth, of, as I said, raising our own children and serving the community since the late 1990s, I can say without a doubt that we have a massive problem in accepting the fact that our youth, inshallah, will someday replace us. And that problem stems from a few things. Number one, we have this deep-seated insecurity that somehow the youth are actually, and we say this very awkwardly, we say they're so American in their ways. Right? They're so American in the way they act and the way they talk. And what I always say, what did you expect of them? I mean, you made a hijrah, you made dua to Allah to come to America, if you're of immigrant background, and of course those who converted to Islam made a spiritual hijrah, but regardless, we are both a product of migration, and then they are born and raised here. My mother says it's in the water. Even if you try to insulate them, they will acquire the ways, if you will, of the broader American society. So we should not say to them, so that they develop almost a dual identity or a schizophrenia about being Muslim or American, but we should say to them, take the best aspects of what American society teaches you, and then bring that into your ability or your desire to serve the community. But we should not create in them some kind of a complex by virtue of how they are and who they are. And what do I mean by that? These children, young people, youth, as they're emerging, they ask a lot of questions. Whereas you and I, if we were sitting in a meeting and we always invite the youth and say the youth should come to the board meeting, let them come and be joined so they can learn. And then the board members are discussing something. Everybody in the room knows that what's being proposed by the board is unrealistic, incomprehensible, impossible to achieve, cannot be done. It's Isha prayer. It's 10:30 at night in the masjid, and the leaders are saying, 9 a.m., we want all the community to come out for a major protest about such and such issue. No one has talked about it, no one has emailed, no one has done anything, and suddenly that's what they're dreaming up. And the youth raises their hand, a young man or a young woman, and says something simple like, I'm sorry, I agree with the issue, I know it's important, but can't we make it something like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon to give us some time to get the word out to people, to encourage them to come, to make some personal phone calls, to post it on social media, whatever the case is. The youth may ask that question. The rest of us will create this sort of false, appeasement and say, I don't really want to say it. Mashallah, Abu Omar, who is my name, for example, mashallah, he's been serving the community for so long. If we say something, no. Part of the beauty of America is that it's teaching our children to be inquisitive, to be curious, to be asking questions. You and I have to be ready, because the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were learning from him. Some of them were as young as 9 and 10 years old, and others were much older, in their 40s when they accepted Islam. But when it came time to a decision, they would often say, is this wahi? Is what you are telling us revelation? Have you received a direct signal from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is this something that you are preferring to do? If it is the latter, if it is the second part, if you have come up with something, let us debate it and discuss it. And there is nothing wrong with that. And the youth will never emerge as leaders if we shut them down and say, how dare you bring up the idea of moving the time of such and such event, or whatever the case was. How do you know who that person is? Do you know how long they served? Frankly, I don't really care how long they served. If the idea is not practical, somebody should bring it up with respect, with civility, but it should be brought up. Number 2, we're also not ready for the youth, because as we watch them, we understand that the pace at which they move, the sheer pace at which they move to get things done, we are not there yet, because we're used to the more slow-paced life. Not showing up to things on time, not starting on time, right? Just allowing time to just waste away. Surah Al-Asr, one of the most important surahs of the Quran, the lessons of which equate to almost 1/3, if you will, of the teachings of the Quran, as has been mentioned by our scholars. The one that talks about time, we should realize that the reason they're moving at the pace of time is because they sense the urgency of now. They understand how difficult things are. So when they want to move fast, we should advise them and slow them down slightly, but not try to bring them to our level of the pace of work. And why is that critical? Believe me, if you sit with the youth, if you talk to them, they ask a lot of questions. They're so sincere in their questions. I want us to get to a point where we start to enjoy hearing those questions. I don't want to always be the people who are defensive and as if it's like my Islam, my identity that you're attacking because you're asking questions. And one of the ways to do that is to help them to relate to us through what I call the 5A model, and I'll close with that. First and foremost, we help the youth to acknowledge. A for acknowledgement. Acknowledge that Islamic work in America existed before the arrival of the immigrants with the African American community, and acknowledge the achievements that they made, acknowledge the achievements of the immigrants who came in the 20s and 30s and 40s, whatever degrees to which they did it. We have a mother mosque in Iowa because of the immigrants who came from the Levant, which is present-day Lebanon and Syria and other places. Whatever they did, the fact that there is a mother mosque People have to acknowledge that and appreciate and be aware of the fact that that existed. Acknowledgement allows for the youth to understand that we didn't come out of a vacuum. There were people who served before us. The second A is appreciation. We have to show appreciation what people did before us, who the people are that are serving currently, and who will come after us. If we do that, the youth, inshallah ta'ala, will begin to appreciate who we are. It's only a matter of time that we stand with them shoulder to shoulder, and before one of them emerges as the leader and indeed becomes our leader, and we have to follow them. Appreciation is the second A. The third one is to teach the youth analysis. The power of analysis in the Muslim community is superficial at best. We don't want to take the time to understand issues. We don't want to go deeper into the causes of conflict. Not only interpersonal conflict, but also conflict at the community level and ultimately at the national and international level. We only want to look at things superficially. Read a tweet and preach a sermon based on a tweet. It doesn't work that way. Our youth have to begin to appreciate the sheer power of analysis, of taking in facts, of looking at things, of asking questions, of understanding in a very research-oriented way what was attempted to be done, what actually got done. That's the analytical part. The fourth A is assessment. Assessment and evaluation, muhasaba. This is at a personal level, sitting at the end of the night and saying, "Oh Allah, I serve people by day, and I'm harsh to my family by night. Oh Allah, I am polite to the population, to the public at large. I am harsh with those who serve with me on the board. Oh Allah," this is muhasaba. This is assessment at the individual level. But when you increase it and extend it, evaluation at the community level, we begin to see that you can take an acknowledgement and appreciation. That's fine. But analysis lends to assessment. Analysis says to us that there comes a time when you must say, when you did this, it worked out well. When you did this, it didn't work out. And here are our humble reasons for why we think that didn't work out. After acknowledging and appreciating, analyzing and assessing, the last A is advancement. The last A, we must be able to infuse in our youth a love to move the community ahead, a deep desire to move the community ahead. We cannot have a status quo in our masajids, Islamic centers, Islamic schools, relief agencies, social service agencies. The same thing going on year after year after year. It is high time that we turn to our youth and say, "You are not only our hope for the future, you are our hope now. Work with us, stand with us, serve with us, learn from us and teach us, but help us to advance that state." And how do I know this, and what do we know about this? When you look at the companions, and there's always never enough time to talk about this, the beloved of Allah, the Prophet ﷺ, surrounded himself by the youth. And so it was that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu surrounded himself by young people as well. So much so that Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma jami'an, when he was sitting in the majalis of the elders, he was taking in everything that was going on. And when they asked him, one time Umar ibn Khattab asked the majalis, the elders, "What do you say about the surah An-Nasr, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ?" And they gave the literal translations. This is talking about a victory from Allah, and when that victory comes, more and more people will enter into Islam. And he turned to Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu and he said, "What do you say about this verse?" And a boy, a young man, a beloved companion who had grown up in the shadow of Nubuwah, he said, "When I read and hear that verse, those verses are revealed, that Allah is telling us the end of the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the end of the mission is near." Brothers and sisters, Allah has given us a chance to raise these young children with a lot of hope. Let us now turn to them and say, "We are ready, we are willing, we want you to come, but you'll have to serve first before you ever think about leading." but we shouldn't dampen their spirits while they're serving. We should take their suggestions and advance, inshallah, the cause. For together, inshallah, the community will be able to not only survive the current socio-political climate, but we'll be able to look back and say, may Allah bless us for raising those youth who now lead us. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.